What is Robot Voices really about? If you're a fan of 21 Pilots, I'm sure you heard Breach in its entirety when it came out back in September. And there's one song on that track list which stood out to me the first time I heard the album, and stood out to a number of other people for several different reasons. Now obviously, if you didn't already know, the song Robot Voices features interpolation from another song by a band called Blanket Approval, the song being My Soft Spots, My Robots. So that right off the bat is one reason why this song sort of stands out among the others, because it's somewhat a cover of an already existing song. It certainly was inspired by Tyler listening to this other song by Blanket Approval. Because of that, some people have even gone so far as to say that it doesn't sound like a 21 Pilots song. It's an odd one out in their entire discography because it doesn't really sound like anything that they have made in the past. I myself am inclined to disagree with that sentiment. I think it's a song that would fit very well on an album like Scaled and Icy, and for that reason, isn't a song which stands out from the rest of their discography because it's similar in sound to one of their albums. Now, perhaps you disagree with me in that regard, but nevertheless, there is another reason why this song somewhat stands out, because it is in many ways one of the most confusing songs off of Breach. What are these lyrics actually talking about? Well, let's take a look at the lyrics themselves and see if we can uncover anything by doing so. The first verse starts with these lines. They keep me company, the robots and machines in my room, an understanding. The beeps and tones they make, the only advice I take, the inside jokes are landing. Now, just as a bit of a spoiler perhaps, my interpretation of the song, holistically, is that it is talking about new technology, not necessarily AI technology, as some people have theorized. It could be, but it isn't necessarily about that. But I see it as talking about technology generally speaking, and new technology generally speaking, and how in this day and age we are so surrounded by different pieces of technology, whether it be a laptop, a desktop, a television, and most especially our phones. And because of that, I see the song as a whole, and specifically this first verse which introduces us to the song, as a commentary on the use of technology and the use of social media. Because we see these lines, they keep me company, the robots and machines in my room. How often nowadays do people talk about finding solace or comfort in these technological devices? There's the whole idea of your comfort show, the television show that is a comfort to watch, or unwinding for the day by playing video games, or, and I know this sounds crazy, perhaps even watching YouTube videos. And not to get into the weeds of a commentary on the state of our society, but studies keep showing that each generation is getting more lonely than the last, and as a result are relying more and more on technological advances to keep them company. Exactly as he mentions in this first verse. And this verse continues, and this is what I see sort of as a mixture between technology and social media more specifically. The beeps and tones they make, the only advice I take, the inside jokes are landing. How often do we try to find advice and knowledge from the internet, or perhaps more specifically from our social media algorithms? And that's sort of where I see it going into the idea of the inside jokes are landing. This idea of something being like an echo chamber, just reverberating back at you your own thoughts and your own ideas to kind of reconfirm what you already think. Taking advice from what you see everyone else talking about on social media rather than some actually well-researched knowledge. And especially the end of this verse, now I'm waiting for the changes everyone sees, feeling so fancy, really to me implies the idea of wanting to stay on the cutting edge of the latest technological trends, without necessarily even knowing why sometimes, but always wanting to upgrade to the newest thing. Now, I'm not saying everyone does this. I'm sure many of you watching will push back and argue that this isn't you. You don't do this. You don't just go out and get the latest piece of technology. But even if you don't the second it comes out, at some point you will, probably sooner than you actually have to. I think we all do this to some extent. And we do it because everyone says there's some wonderful change that will come about if you do it. And you feel sort of fancy by having it. And even if you don't yourself adopt these trends or play into this sort of societal norm, I'm sure you know people who do. I'm sure you can think of someone you know, whether personally or just as an acquaintance or a coworker, who does this, who always has the latest piece of technology. And then moving into the chorus, we once again have this sentiment. My robot told me I shouldn't fear. When I met you, I found you safe and warm. The robot voices would reassure me. Again, this idea of finding comfort and solace and a coziness, if you will, inside these technologies, inside these actually lifeless and inanimate objects, which sort of take on an artificial life that we give them, and because of that become a comfort or companion to us in a sort of almost subconscious sense. So far, the image that this is really all conjuring up in my mind, and what the second verse continues to speak to, is the idea of someone sitting alone in their room, surrounded by technology and interacting with the technological companions that they have surrounded themselves with, and forgetting, in a sense, drowning out, in a sense, the loneliness that they might be experiencing by using all of this. Sitting in the darkness, but not noticing because they have the blinding lights of technology facing them and surrounding them. And I think it's interesting to see 21 Pilots making a song like this, because so often throughout their discography, but especially in some of their earlier stuff, they talk about themes of loneliness and isolation. I mean, Skilled and Icy, right? Skilled Back and Isolated. But over the course of their career, technology has continued to advance and become more prominent in our lives than even it was when they were starting out. And that's not to say it wasn't at all when they were starting out. It certainly was. But it's become more and more so, especially with the rise and prominence of various social media platforms. And really, this song seems to be a different way of approaching and discussing loneliness, because it's a loneliness that doesn't seem like you are alone. It's perhaps one of the more dangerous forms of loneliness, because it truly is, in a lot of senses, a lonely existence, what is described in the song, the way I understand it. But it is also one which is described as not feeling lonely, at least initially. So you don't recognize how lonely you are, you don't seek out the companionship of actual humans, as opposed to your computer screens. Again, verse 2 kind of speaks to this. The half-drawn blinds casting lines on the floor. As my metal friend flashes in time, the daisy-chained power strips generating a newfound loneliness. So again, this sort of speaks to the scene I was just describing. Someone sitting with the blinds drawn and surrounded by all this technology, which is just bringing in more loneliness into their lives. And still sitting, waiting for the changes as the verse ends, waiting for what everyone's talking about, what's so awesome about this technology. Feeling so fancy. Now, some have described this as a love song, and perhaps it is. Perhaps there is another interpretation that you can make of what is going on here to make it into something that is a love song. But I don't really see it as that so much as an exploration of this glorified loneliness that many people face today in society. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments how you interpret the song, everything you disagree with about my interpretation of robot voices. This video was inspired by a comment from Atlas07 asking for different interpretations of robot voices. If you have an idea for a video or a question you would like to be answered, simply comment down below on this video or head over to the community tab and leave your question there. And as always, don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews.